Liam's world was a symphony of rustling leaves and creaking branches. He knew the age of a live oak by the texture of its bark, the health of a maple by the color of its leaves, and the mood of a willow by the way its fronds swayed in the breeze. His hands, calloused and strong, were as comfortable on a chainsaw as they were on the delicate sprouts of a new sapling. He was an arborist, a quiet guardian of the town's green heart. For the past 15 years, his job had been to protect, prune, and preserve the trees of Sunnyside, a town proud of its lush, tree-lined streets. When he bought his house in the new development of the Willows, he did so with the same loving eye he used for his trees. It was an older neighborhood, a pocket of Sunnyside where the developers had been kind enough to leave some of the original, mature trees. His particular lot, a sprawling corner property, was anchored by a magnificent trio of ancient pecan trees. They were giants, their canopies so vast they created a perpetual, cool shade over his house, a living, breathing testament to the history of the land. To Liam, they were more than just trees. They were his reason for being, a tangible connection to the earth and his craft. He spent his weekends meticulously caring for them, pruning away dead limbs, fertilizing the soil, and simply sitting beneath their protective embrace, feeling the slow, silent pulse of nature. To his neighbors, however, they were a problem. The Homeowners Association of the Willows was a tyrannical bureaucracy, ruled with an iron fist by one Mrs. Gable, a woman with a posture as stiff as her resolve. Mrs. Gable had a deep-seated love for uniformity, and a pathological hatred for anything she deemed untidy. Her own yard was a barren wasteland of perfectly manicured grass, and a single, lonely-looking dwarf pine, which she was rumored to trim with a pair of surgical scissors. The pecan trees, with their sprawling roots and their habit of dropping pecans and leaves in the fall, were, in Mrs. Gable's eyes, the very definition of untidy. The passive-aggressive campaign began subtly. It started with anonymous notes in his mailbox. "Your leaves are on my lawn, please remove. Your trees are blocking my sun. Your pecans are a tripping hazard." Liam, a man who believed in the power of a quiet, friendly interaction, would simply walk over to the neighbors and apologize, offering to rake their leaves or sweep their driveways. He was met with cold smiles and whispered comments about his old-fashioned yard. Then came the official summons. A crisp, white envelope with the HOA's gold-embossed logo appeared in his mailbox. It was a formal violation notice. Violation of Section 4.6, Article B, Landscape Maintenance. The notice went on to cite excessive foliage, uncontrolled growth, and potential hazard to private and public property. The solution, the notice declared, was a professional pruning, to remove all overhanging limbs and a significant portion of the canopy. It was a euphemism for a brutal, aggressive topping that would forever scar the trees and, in all likelihood, kill them. Liam felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. It wasn't just a violation, it was a personal attack. He was an arborist. He knew the right way to care for a tree, and this was not it. He knew that the professional service the HOA would recommend would be nothing more than a crew of unqualified landscapers with chainsaws, a crew that would do irreparable damage. He decided to go to the source. He called Mrs. Gable, hoping a quiet conversation could clear things up. He was met with a cold, formal voice on the other end. "Mr. Miller, I'm glad you called. I assume you've received the notice." "Yes, Mrs. Gable, I have. I wanted to talk to you about the trees. They are perfectly healthy. I assure you, I take very good care of them. The pruning you're suggesting would be devastating to them. Devastating to them, or devastating to your wallet? She asked, a cruel laugh in her voice. The board has already approved the expense. The bid from Greenview Landscaping is very reasonable. They will have the work done within a week. Liam felt a flash of anger. Mrs. Gable, with all due respect, topping those trees will kill them. The proper way to prune a tree is to— I don't care what your proper way is, Mr. Miller. The board has made a decision based on safety and aesthetics. Your trees are a menace to this community. They drop limbs, they block the sun, and they make the neighborhood look unkempt. The decision is final. You have 3 days to comply, or the HOA will have the work done and bill you for it. She hung up without another word. Liam stood there, phone in hand, his heart pounding with a mixture of fury and despair. They were going to destroy his trees. He had to stop them. He needed to find a way to make them understand. He began his counteroffensive. He wrote a formal letter to the HOA board, a 2-page document filled with scientific terms and arborist jargon, citing city codes and professional standards. He included photos of the trees, painstakingly labeled to show their health and beauty. He even cited a city ordinance about protecting heritage trees. The response from the HOA was a single, one-sentence email. The board finds your letter unconvincing. The decision stands. Liam was a man who lived by rules. He had always believed that if you followed the law, if you were a good person, if you did things the right way, things would work out. But the HOA was operating in a world of its own. A world where rules were arbitrary and power was the only thing that mattered. He decided he would go to the public meeting. The quarterly HOA meeting was a dreaded event, a boring procession of budget reports and petty complaints. But Liam knew that this time, it would be different. He would stand up and make his case. He would show them that he was not just another homeowner, he was an expert. He was a professional. The meeting was held in a sterile community room, a place of beige walls and uncomfortable chairs. Mrs. Gable sat at the head of a long table, her expression a mask of bored indifference. Liam was the last item on the agenda. He stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. Members of the board, he began, his voice surprisingly steady. My name is Liam Miller. I'm the owner of the house at 178 Willow Creek. I'm here to discuss the violation. Notice regarding my pecan trees. Mrs. Gable sighed. Mr. Miller, as I told you on the phone, the board has already made a decision. Your trees are a liability and an eyesore. We are moving on. No, Mrs. Gable, Liam said, a new firmness in his voice. You are not. I have studied your bylaws. You cannot force me to perform an action that is detrimental to my property. And the pruning you're recommending will destroy my trees. It is not an act of preservation. It's an act of vandalism. A few people in the audience murmured. A man in the front row, a neighbor who had complained about the leaves, muttered. They're just trees, Liam. We want the neighborhood to look nice. They're not just trees, sir, Liam said, his voice rising with passion. They are living things. They provide shade. They improve air quality. They increase your property values. And they are protected by city ordinance. You can't just cut them down because you think they're messy. Mrs. Gable, her face pale with fury, slammed her hand on the table. Mr. Miller, you are out of order. This is an HOA meeting, not a public forum for your strange obsession with trees. We have a vote scheduled. It is over. No, it's not, Liam said, a defiant glint in his eye. You haven't heard my qualifications yet. He proceeded to give a mini lecture, a torrent of information about proper tree care, the dangers of topping, and the legal ramifications of destroying a heritage tree. He cited his certifications, his years of experience, and his knowledge of the city's environmental codes. He was a man transformed, no longer the quiet, unassuming neighbor, but a fierce advocate for the silent giants on his lawn. The crowd was rapt. They had never seen this side of Liam. He was articulate, knowledgeable, and passionate. He spoke with the authority of a man who knew his subject inside and out. Mrs. Gable, however, was unimpressed. "All very impressive, Mr. Miller," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "But it's just talk. We have a contract with a reputable landscaping company. They will do the work. It's a matter of safety." Liam's jaw tightened. He knew what she was doing. She was painting him as an eccentric, a man who loved his trees more than he cared about his neighbor's safety. She was dismissing his expertise as just another opinion. "What if I told you," Liam said, his voice dropping to a low, calm whisper, "that the city of Sunnyside has an ordinance against this very kind of pruning? That the penalty for doing this could be a hefty fine for the HOA and a legal challenge from me." Mrs. Gable laughed, a shrill, unpleasant sound. "A legal challenge? From a man who drives a beat-up old truck and spends his weekends raking leaves? I think you're overestimating yourself, Mr. Miller." Liam simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. He had given them every opportunity. He had tried to be reasonable, to be a good neighbor, to respect their authority. But they had met him with contempt and arrogance at every turn. They had forced his hand. He had no choice but to show them exactly what they were up against. He pulled a small, laminated card from his wallet. It was an official city ID, with his photo and title. He laid it on the table and slid it slowly toward Mrs. Gable. She looked at it, her face a mask of bored impatience, and then a look of pure, unadulterated shock crept into her eyes. The color drained from her face as she read the words on the card. The room was silent. The card read, "Liam Miller, Chief Arborist, City of Sunnyside." The air in the community room grew thick with a sudden, profound quiet. Every eye was on Mrs. Gable, whose face had gone from confident smugness to utter, horrified disbelief. The man she had just called a menace, the man whose professional opinion she had dismissed as a strange obsession, was the highest-ranking tree authority in the entire town. The HOA board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The neighbors who had been grumbling about the leaves now looked at Liam with a new, sober respect. The one who had scoffed at him about them being just trees now looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. This was not a homeowner with a hobby. This was a man with power, and that power was rooted in a deep, professional knowledge of the very subject they had tried to dismiss. The power dynamic had just shifted in a very dramatic and public way. And Liam, with the quiet confidence of a man who held all the cards, simply stood there, waiting for their response. The first part of their story was over. The stage was set for the grand resolution. That's the first half of the story for you. This part establishes the conflict, introduces the characters, and builds up to the big reveal at the end of the HOA meeting. The next part will explore the fallout from this reveal and the final resolution of the conflict. The silence in the community room was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that had fallen over the room. The card, lying face up on the long table, was a small, unassuming piece of plastic. Yet it held the weight of an entire town's authority. Mrs. Gable stared at it, her mouth slightly agape, a grotesque, silent fish. Her meticulously constructed world of power and influence was crumbling before her eyes. The man she had ridiculed as a simple homeowner with a strange obsession was not just an arborist. He was the head of the entire department. He was her superior in every way that mattered when it came to the subject at hand. The whispers began, a slow, building wave. "Chief Arborist," a woman murmured. "He's the one who saved the old maple on Main Street last year, isn't he?" Another added. A man, who had recently had his front yard tree professionally trimmed by the city, suddenly remembered seeing a man with a quiet demeanor and calm confidence directing the crew. It was Liam. The puzzle pieces of his quiet life suddenly clicked into place for everyone in the room, revealing a picture of profound, unassuming competence. Mrs. Gable, her mind racing, tried to bluff her way out. She had to. Her reputation, her position, her entire identity as the Queen of the Willows depended on it. She picked up the card, a look of contempt on her face, as if it were a piece of garbage. "I don't know what this is, Mr. Miller," she said, her voice shaking slightly but holding firm. "I'm sure anyone can get a card like this printed. It means nothing. The HOA board has voted. The decision is final. You have a deadline to meet." But her words had lost all power. The air of authority she had carefully cultivated had evaporated. One of the other board members, a nervous-looking man named John, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've seen that card before. Liam's name is on a lot of the city's official environmental notices. He's legit." Mrs. Gable ignored him. "This is a stunt, Mr. Miller, a desperate move to avoid following the rules, and I find it frankly disgraceful. You have no right to come in here and use your professional title to intimidate us. This is a homeowners association, not a city council meeting." Liam, who had remained silent through her desperate tirade, finally spoke. His voice was calm, a sharp contrast to her rising hysteria. "Mrs. Gable, I'm not here to intimidate you. I'm here to educate you, and to prevent you from making a very costly mistake, both legally and financially, for this community." He then proceeded to lay out the facts, not as a homeowner, but as a city official. "Sunnyside Municipal Code, Section 1 to B," he began, his voice taking on the clear, precise tone of an expert. "It specifically states that any tree designated as a heritage tree is protected from any action that would cause significant, irreparable harm. My 3 pecan trees were certified as heritage trees back in 2005. That's a matter of public record, and as the city's chief arborist, I can assure you that topping them, as you've ordered, falls squarely into that category." Mrs. Gable spluttered. But our bylaws supersede city code on our private property." "They don't," Liam stated, a finality in his tone. "City code always takes precedence. In fact, if you were to move forward with this, the city would be forced to issue a stop work order. The fine for a violation of this kind is a minimum of $20,000 per tree." A collective gasp went through the room. The board members, who who had been hiding behind Mrs. Gable's authority, now looked at her with a dawning horror. $20,000 per tree. $60,000 in fines. And that was just the city. Liam had also mentioned a legal challenge. And if you're not satisfied with that, Liam continued, I've already spoken with the city's legal department. They are prepared to issue an injunction to prevent any work from taking place on my property without my consent. And as for your landscaping company, Greenview, they don't have the necessary certifications to work on a heritage tree. They would lose their business license for the entire city. I would be forced to revoke it myself. The board members, looking at their own potential financial ruin, finally broke. John, the nervous board member, stood up. Mrs. Gable, I think we've heard enough. I make a motion to immediately rescind the violation notice for Mr. Miller's property. We also need to issue a formal apology. A few other members quickly seconded the motion. Mrs. Gable looked from face to face, her own authority draining away with each passing second. Her power was gone. She was a general without an army. She sat back in her chair, a defeated lump of a person, her jaw clenched in silent fury. The motion passed unanimously. The decision was overturned. Liam's trees were safe. Liam didn't gloat. He didn't make a scene. He simply collected his card, folded his hands, and sat back down. The meeting, which had been a hostile inquisition, had suddenly become a public lesson in humility. The remaining items on the agenda were rushed through with unprecedented speed. No one had the stomach for a fight anymore. The meeting adjourned with a whimper, and the crowd of neighbors who had come to watch the spectacle left in a state of stunned silence. The fallout was swift and decisive. The next day, a formal hand-delivered apology from the HOA board was placed in Liam's mailbox. It was signed by every member except Mrs. Gable. She had, as it turned out, resigned in a fit of pique that very night. Her reign of terror over the community was officially over. The most profound change, however, was in the neighborhood itself. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid him now approached him with newfound respect. The man who had been a source of complaints was now an authority, a font of knowledge they suddenly, desperately wanted to tap into. Liam, a neighbor named Sarah, asked one afternoon, her voice hesitant, "My Japanese maple. Its leaves are turning brown. What do you think is wrong with it?" Liam, without a moment's hesitation, walked over to her yard, knelt down, and examined the tree with a careful, knowing eye. He identified a fungal issue, a common problem for maples in the area. He prescribed a simple solution, a natural fungicide, and a change in her watering schedule. The next week, the leaves were green again, and Sarah was a lifelong convert. The pecans that fell from his trees in the autumn were no longer a tripping hazard. They were a source of fascination. Neighbors, who had once complained about them, now came with buckets, asking if they could gather them for baking. Liam, ever the good neighbor, would give them a hand, and the trees themselves. They became a symbol of his quiet, undeniable power. He continued to care for them with the same loving devotion he always had. He would be seen in his yard, a man at peace with his world, his hands tending to the giants on his lawn. He would prune a branch here, fertilize a root there, his movements as fluid and precise as a surgeon's. The neighbors would often stop to watch, no longer with suspicion, but with a quiet respect, a deep understanding of the man who lived among them. The grand pecan trees, with their sprawling canopies and their deep ancient roots, had not only weathered the storm of an overzealous HOA, but they had also become a living testament to the fact that true authority is not found in an embossed logo or a shrill, demanding voice. It is found in quiet knowledge, humble expertise, and the courage to stand up for what is right, no matter how small the battle may seem. Liam had not only saved his trees, he had re-established a sense of community, a sense of respect, in a place that had become too obsessed with appearances. He was the quiet guardian of the town's green heart, and now, finally, his neighbors understood.